Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. We are going live today to answer, well, it wasn't even really a question necessarily. It was kind of a post that I posted earlier this week that got a lot of feedback. Like a lot of people liked the post or loved it or shared it. And then some people said, this is really hard. How do I even do this? And so we wanted to answer that question. So the post was, learn to be okay with people not knowing your side of the story. You have nothing to prove to anyone. And I think that people read that and they're like, like you read that and you're like, oh, what a relief. Like they don't have to, because we spend so much psychic energy thinking about how other people are perceiving us, or like, oh, what are they, they don't know my side of the story. They don't know what I'm going through. They don't know what I've been through. They don't know this, these body of details and this body of details. And they could be thinking this about me. They could be thinking that about me, and you can kind of use up so much of your own energy and freak yourself out and cause fear and worry and all sorts of negative emotions with this deep desire for people to know your side of the story and to prove to you that like what I'm doing makes sense, and I think that when you start to deconstruct this negative emotion and figure out something to do instead of, spinning your wheels, worrying about everybody in the world knowing all of the details of your side of the story. So they say, oh, okay, that makes sense. She's justified, in what she's doing. This all makes sense now. What can you do with that feeling? Can you get rid of it? Can you shift it so that you feel good more of the time and less of this kind of like nagging concern for making sure everybody, knows what you're up to and why you're doing what you're doing?
It's almost like, I feel like sometimes people have, there's this idea that everyone has to come to some level of agreement about things, because a lot of the times, if it's your significant other, if it's someone that you're living with, if it like affects your daily interaction, that might be something that's worth pursuing. I mean, maybe it's worthwhile. Like, if Melissa and I are just at odds with something, which doesn't ever really happen. I mean, sometimes if we have, tiffs or fights or whatever, it's usually because one or the other of us is just kind of in a crappy state. And that crappy state just kind of like,
I'm hungry, I need to work out.
Yeah. Or like, I'm annoying the hell out of you and like you can't handle it because you haven't exercised enough. Yeah. And it's like, she has to do a lot of rituals to be able to stand being around me. But as long as you have, you can do it, But like, it's kind of true. But you know what I'm saying? Like, that's different. But if it's like your sister that you see 3 or 4 times a year, or, your parents don't approve of what you're doing, is it their lack of approval that's really bothering you? Or is it your incessant thinking about what you imagine to be their lack of approval? I think that's a really important thing.
Oh, yeah.
Not everybody has to agree about everything. Not everyone has to understand. Like, there's a lot of people in my family who, I have absolutely no idea what they think about me. I've got absolutely no idea about what they think about what I'm doing. I've got no idea if they think about I have no clue. And I also, except for right now, as I'm using it as an example, I never think about what they think of me, ever. And therefore, what they think about me, or what I think about what they think about me, is utterly irrelevant. Like, it doesn't impact my daily life. I wake up, I have my coffee, I'm feeling good. Now, the thing is, I have no reason to believe that they think badly of me. But if I did, it wouldn't matter, because that's not really a part of my experience. And I think one of those big things is like, like when you're growing up, especially if you've got a lot of siblings and stuff like that, when you're going to go out to eat, you got to decide where you're going to go. Or like back in the days of like Blockbuster and all this different stuff, had to agree on a movie, had to agree on a video game. We have to come to a consensus about what we're going to do as a family. I think sometimes that pattern exists and continues well beyond the point at which it's like a just logistical concern. Like, well, we're going to go to Disney World or Disneyland. We have to vote, and some people are not going to be happy. We have to come to an agreement or whatever. I don't think we have to come to an agreement about whether what you did 15 years ago is what you should have done. That's not really relevant. I think there is that pressure, though. I want my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, whoever, to share my view, or to respect my view, or to acknowledge that my view is a valid one or whatever. And for me, I found a lot of freedom in kind of reevaluating, why is that important to me? Like, why? And for me, one of the things that helped a lot was I got into like, what is my understanding of another person made out of? So like, if you and I have a conversation, like let's say we have a disagreement, but I come away from it feeling basically okay about you. I'm like, we don't agree on things, but she's pretty good, he's pretty good. It's their business. They feel that way, I feel this way. what is it about the situation that allows me to come away feeling that way versus coming away saying, oh, they're terrible. Did you hear their political view? Or, oh my God, did you hear what they're doing with their child? I could never be friends with anyone who would do that. Is it something different about you, or is it something different about me? And in most cases, the way I come away feeling from a given conversation, whether it's productive or not, whether it's friendly or not, the way I come away feeling about it and about the other person has more to do with me and the state that I'm in and how happy I am with my life and kind of just the quality of what it's like to be me. How's my body feeling? How am I feeling about my future? How am I feeling about what I have done? How am I feeling about what I'm planning on doing next? The degree of magnanimity, right, of goodwill that I feel towards you has a hell of a lot more to do with what's going on with me than it does with what you have done or whatever the argument was about or whatever. And so when I understand that that's true for me, that there are times when I am less than magnanimous towards other people because of the state that I'm in, not because of what they've done or the details of the whatever, but because of the state I'm in. And then there are times when people behave in a way that I think is fairly objectively inappropriate towards me. I mean, out in public, someone rams into you and doesn't say anything or cuts you off in traffic or says something nasty to you or something like that. And, you just kind of are like, well, probably that behavior makes sense if I knew what was going on with that person. It's not like I'm overflowing with compassion for them necessarily. It's just like, I've been there. I've been somewhere like that. I'd hate to be in a state where it was possible for me to behave that way towards someone in public, So let's just sort of say whatever and move on with the rest of the day. That my ability to do that has everything to do with my state, not to do with them. And so if I can kind of reverse that, if there's someone who is not giving me the benefit of the doubt, or if there's someone who doesn't seem willing or interested to see how I could feel the way I'm feeling without being a bad person, or how I could have done what I did without something being wrong with me or something like that, the reason they're not more interested in understanding what really happened is their state of consciousness. It's what it's like to be them in that moment in time. And so when I'm really wanting to be understood by people who are misunderstanding me because of the shitty state that they're in, because of the bad experience that they're having, because of the lack of resources to which they have access, you know what I'm saying? What I'm really wanting them to do is to access a level of understanding of their reality, that happens to be me, that is not accessible to them from the state where they are. And I am taking cues. I'm saying, okay, because they can't understand something that I want them to understand because of the state of consciousness that they're currently occupying, what I'm going to do is downgrade my state of consciousness so that I'm suffering over the fact. Because I don't understand that my experience isn't coming from what they can't understand. It's coming from what I can't understand. I can't understand that it doesn't matter what they can't understand because of the state of consciousness that they are in. I'm suffering because of the, well, this is how I get out of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is like how I make sense out of this. So it's like, why is this bothering me so much? And it's ultimately because, and I think that this is true, if I'm having an intrapersonal problem, which is to say, if I personally am suffering, not unhappy with, not wanting to change, but really suffering over, if I'm having an intrapersonal problem with an interpersonal relationship dynamic, so like you and I don't agree, you said something to me, and I'm suffering over that within myself, that intrapersonal suffering occurring as a result of an interpersonal interaction is always ultimately the byproduct of an intrapersonal problem. I have certain meaning assignments that I set up when you disagree with me. I have certain prerequisites for being okay. I believe that I need you to understand certain things in order for me to feel the way that I want to feel. And so if I'm suffering over an interpersonal dynamic, that's different than changing it. That's different than moving on. That's different than trying to create it. If I'm suffering over it, that's an intrapersonal thing. It's a within me fault. It's not a dynamic thing. And to the extent that I can convince myself that that's true, I can get really creative in ways of building a new experience of you and whatever your experience of me seems to be. But if I'm locked into this thing, it's like we're at a stalemate. And until your behavior tells me that your experience of me or your understanding of me has changed, I'm not going to budge into a better place. And I don't see that it's my unwillingness to do that that's causing my suffering. I'm stuck with that suffering. But as soon as I identify and pinpoint the source of the suffering, which is the way I am interacting with your interactions with me, that's where my experience is really coming from. As soon as I recognize that, I'm free to change that experience.
It's also really useful to think about how truly impossible it is to actually justify yourself to everyone and to prove yourself. Like, oh, you need to understand why I've made all the choices I've made. So literally I have to play you a whole, like, I've got to tell you about every single detail of my life that's caused me to have the perceptions of myself, the world, and other people, everything that's gone into forming my self-concept and my vision of myself in the world. I mean, just really think about how impossible that job is. And realize that you don't have to do it, just like no one else has to prove to you why they've made the choices they've made. You kind of get to that point where you make this assumption that everyone's just doing the best that they can. They're doing the best they can with the resources they have access to right now. And when you give people that benefit and you give yourself that benefit, the need to prove yourself to them or explain yourself to other people, it really just starts to fall away. It's like, and by doing that, you just kind of reflect out this kind of general, I'm sure what you're doing makes sense. I may not agree with it, because you can disagree with what people are doing, but you can understand that they're doing what makes sense to them. And I think that frees me so much from, this type of judgment, or like what they're doing is wrong, or it's stupid, or it makes no sense what they're doing. To know that what they're doing must make sense to them, or else they wouldn't be doing it. There must be reasons that this person is doing what they're doing. And when you drop your desire to judge others and to, say things about them or feel ways about them that don't feel good to you but feel justified, that when you start to realize, oh my goodness, I'm doing that thing to them, this is the thing I don't want them to be doing to me. And that's why everything's a mirror. Everything is teaching you something about yourself. Like when you feel that urge, to justify yourself to someone else, or say, oh my God, they have to know my story. I've got to, tell them something or prove why what I was doing makes sense. That's like that pausing. Why am I scrambling? Why am I worried about, and really getting to the root of it, like journaling about it, right? Why do I care so much about them knowing my side of the story? Why do I feel like I need to prove or justify myself to anybody else? And when you get to that root and you start saying, oh, I'm not giving other people the benefit of the doubt, it really just shows you that interpersonal, was it intra?
Intra.
I
don't know what you're...
Intra is within yourself.
Yeah.
Intrapersonal work that you need to do, that it's not really an interpersonal thing.
Yeah. Well, and I think the interesting thing about that is, like, so let's say that I am sort of shakeable in terms of my feelings of okayness. I've got all these prerequisites that kind of have to be. There's certain things that have to happen, and there's certain other things that have to not happen in order for me to feel emotionally okay. One of the things that has to happen, and I, by the way, I have to feel emotionally okay, because if I don't, I feel not okay. My world's not right. I'm in fight or flight. I'm worried. I'm anxious. If I feel not okay in my world, that means that I'm not okay. And so I'm freaking out, like an unstable sort of like shifting ground and stuff like that. So I really need you to fulfill my prerequisites, right? One of my prerequisites is you have to like me. You have to agree with the things that I've done. Another is that you have to, if you don't like them, you must, hey Jimmy, you have to understand why I did it. That is a constraint that exists within me that I could change, right? If I were aware of it and I saw how it operated and I knew how to change things within myself, I could change that. So I have a constraint that says I need certain people, or I need everyone to understand or approve of everything that I do, certain things that I do, whatever the case may be. And then you don't understand something I've done, or you don't agree with something I've done, and you're a real jerk about it, let's say. Let's just say hypothetically that not only do you not agree, but you're also sort of aggressive in your disagreement. It's very easy for me to slip into this illusion, to this, it's a delusion really, that says, oh, I'm suffering, oh, I'm not okay. Why? Oh, because Jimmy doesn't agree with what I'm saying, doesn't agree with what I'm doing. I don't recognize, though, that my enemies are in my own house. When I'm suffering because you disagree with me, I'm not suffering because you disagree with or don't understand me. I'm suffering because your disagreement, your non-understanding constitutes, right, a sufficient variable or a sufficient condition for me to feel not okay. That's something that existed within me. I said to myself, probably not consciously at some point along the way, I need certain people to do certain things in order to be okay. Then that person doesn't do that thing. I feel not okay. I say, I'm suffering now because you did or didn't do that thing. No, I'm suffering now because I've constructed a world and a relationship to it, and I've built habits of interacting with that world that say certain things have to be certain ways in order for me to be okay. And if certain people who are important to me don't like or don't understand or don't approve of, or are unkind in their not liking, not understanding, or not approval of things that I've said or done, or or haven't said or haven't done, then it's time for me to emotionally suffer. That interpersonally makes perfect sense. I mean, 10 out of 10 people would agree with you. They'd say, oh my God, she did what? Oh my God, they said what? Oh my God, he did what? The question is, though, do I want to suffer when suffering is justified, or do I want to have some way of getting out of that experience by transcending that state, by recognizing, I'll be damned, that actually it was coming from me. And then I can kind of renounce the whole thing. And I can it's something really funny about it, where it's like, if I knew that you would understand the way I was, if you would just see what I want you to see, I'm trying to coerce you into that. I'm trying to exert power. Maybe it's emotional intimidation. Maybe it's just reasoning. I'm trying to paint you into a corner where you have to see and experience me the way I feel that you should see and experience me. And because I'm convinced deep down that if you could just see why I'm the way that I am, or why I did what I did, that you would agree with it. But what I'm totally overlooking in that is that if I could just see why you are the way that you are, why you are disagreeing with me or disapproving of me in the ways that you do, I would say, oh shit, it makes perfect sense that they feel that way. And probably, by the way, the things that make it make sense, that they feel the way about you that they do, have absolutely nothing to do with you. It's got to do with how their body feels. It's got to do with how their life is going. It's got to do with how they feel about their relationships other than the one they have with you. It's got to do with all of this stuff, most of which has very little to do with you. Their opinion of you has relatively little to do with you. Your experience of their opinion of you, though, whatever that opinion is, has everything to do with you. And your experience of their opinion of you has a lot to do with how you interact with them. How you interact with them does influence their opinion of you. It makes it more or less easy for them to feel about you the way that they do. And I think it's just recognizing that and stepping back from it. Like you said, saying, okay, why is this important to me? How do I go about making this so important? Is making this, a lot of people, they're going to feel misunderstood. And so they find people in the world and they select those people and make them important on the basis of the fact that they can tell those people aren't going to understand them. Like you know what I mean? Like they consistently seek out and find people who are going to be difficult, whose personal history, whose current state of consciousness makes it impossible for them to interact with them the way that they really want to be interacted with. And it's not until I recognize, oh, I've got a selection process here. This isn't random sampling. I'm choosing and picking the people that I'm going to have in my life. And I'm also choosing and picking the roles that they're going to play. I'm choosing and picking what I feel like I need to get from them and what I need to not get from them in order for me to feel okay. And I'm arranging it in just such a way that I have exactly the experience that I'm having right now. And there's all sorts of things that I could do differently. And a lot of the things that I could do differently, I'm totally justified in doing the way that I'm doing it right now. That's not the question. That's not the issue. It's not about whether or not you ought to be able to expect your mother-in-law to be nice to you when you invite her over to dinner. It's about, does that expectation and does having that as a prerequisite for your emotional okayness improve what it's like to be you? And if it doesn't, can you have them come over and know they're going to say and do the things they're going to say and do, and practice not taking kind of your cues for how you're going to feel from that? It's like one of the things that I've noticed, that there are certain people, and there's a state of consciousness that leads to what I call the opportunistically uncharitable misinterpretation. Have you ever, kind of the classic example of this is, oh, you look nice today. And the person, goes, oh, what are you saying? I didn't look good yesterday, or I don't normally look good, or whatever. You say something to somebody and they just somehow or another twist it to make it so that you've said something wrong. As soon as you know that's a thing that people do sometimes, and as soon as you know that there's a state of consciousness that anybody could go into where you just feel like crap, you feel angry, you feel jilted, you feel cheated, you just feel depressed, you feel not good enough, you feel not where you yourself will tend to opportunistically and uncharitably misinterpret things that are said to you. And sometimes you use that opportunistically uncharitable misinterpretation to make yourself feel bad. Like someone says, oh, you're doing good, like you're losing some weight, or oh, you're doing this, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's something that a nice person says to a fat person like me, or something like that. You do that. Or sometimes if you're in a different kind of bad state, you opportunistically sort of make that opportunistically uncharitable misinterpretation of what they say, and then you use it as a weapon against them. And it has nothing to do with them or what they did. It's got everything to do with the state of consciousness that you're in. When that is done to you, you know what I'm saying? You have this ability to not take it personally. You have this choice that says, sort of, but for the grace of God go I. That's the whole thing. Which is to say, if I were conscious of being who and what they in this moment are conscious of being, I would feel about me the same way they do. And I think that's one of those things too, that there are states of consciousness that I can go into that will cause me to resent and to despise and to be negative to and find fault with people who are being perfectly reasonable. See, because and I think that's a big part of it right there, is that if somebody has a problem with me or doesn't understand me, and I say to myself, they don't understand me, that means that at some level I'm wrong, or I haven't explained myself properly. Then I have to coerce you. I've got to force you. See, because if you don't understand me, that means I'm wrong. But if I recognize that me being right or me being wrong, me being good or me being bad, is just me being in a certain state of consciousness, the right one. You understanding me being good, or that I'm good, or that I mean well, or whatever, versus you not understanding those things. It's just you being in a certain state of consciousness. Do you know what I'm saying? That's it. And when I recognize that that's the case, I recognize the importance that I be in a state from which it's okay for you to feel about me however you do. That's the key thing. I don't need you to feel a certain way about me in order for me to be okay. I need to be conscious of being someone for whom it does not matter what other people think of them. In the sense that it's not that you don't like for people to understand what you're saying, it's that if someone doesn't you need to give other people permission to have the perception and the experience of you that they do in order for you to have a good experience of them having that perception and that experience. It's a gift that you give to yourself. And I think that is kind of the ultimate do unto others, is just recognize that whatever's happening, it's a byproduct of a state of consciousness. So if they're, giving you a hell of a time or talking shit behind your back, it's because of a certain state of consciousness. If you're hurt or offended or threatened or upset or suffering over what they're doing, it's because you're in a certain state. And so you don't need to move them out of the state that's causing them to do what they're doing. You need to ascend to a state from which their behavior becomes irrelevant, or in which their behavior becomes irrelevant to you. That's tremendously freeing.
Oh, absolutely. And that freedom that you get from really detaching and giving yourself that sense of okayness and divorcing it from all of these external cues is the answer to a lot of problems. It's the answer to a lot of problems, because we're always constantly looking outside of us for that sense of okayness, which makes sense. Again, why would we do that? That's crazy. Well, no, it makes perfect sense in the way that most people were raised. We look to see what was our grade, what did the teacher say, what was the feedback, what is everybody else saying, does everyone else think that I'm okay? And most people don't have, unfortunately, that fundamental deep down sense of I'm okay. Even if someone disagrees with me, even if someone doesn't see my side of the story, even if they can't understand me, that's okay. They have that freedom. And it is a lot about control. Like you mentioned something in what you said was kind of like you want to control and manipulate their perception of you. Like, I want you must like me. You must, agree with the stuff that I'm teaching because it makes perfect sense to me. And so if I came on every single day, like trying to get all the haters and people who don't like, the stuff that I teach to like me, I mean, how terrible would that be? Be like, no, you have to understand. People, everyone is where they are, and they're all teaching you something. And that's, getting to that point is like anyone who's triggering something in me that makes me feel bad or makes me want to justify myself. It's like, this person is a teacher. This experience is here to teach me, and it's here to show me where I'm overly attached to other people's perceptions of me. And so if you can start noticing that, instead of just fully embodying it and being miserable or worried or like, oh, how am I going to get them to understand all of the decisions that I've made? That's where awareness is everything, and how, that's like the core fundamental of everything that we teach, is that ability to watch yourself having that experience and start to say, isn't that interesting? Oh, isn't that interesting that I'm like obsessed with them knowing my side of the story, and I'm obsessed with them like of figuring out how I'm going to like get them to see clearly that I was in the right and what I was doing was justified and it makes sense, to learning about it, to creating that space between the experience and like the real you, like the awareness, which is what we did a lot of in this last module that we created, was just about that becoming the watcher, watching these experiences that you're having of whatever it is, like if the thing you're dealing with is, needing to justify yourself, or extreme stress, or feeling like you're on the wrong path in life. I mean, all of like the GNM biological conflicts. It's like, what is this experience made out of? This is, this isn't me. For the longest time, I felt like it was me, like it was so embodied into me that it's just like, this is all that exists. So no wonder that your physical body is adapting your tissues because of your perception. But when you start to develop this separation and you can see, oh, that's not me, that's a state of consciousness. This is something that I'm actually doing. And this is something that I can learn to deconstruct. I mean, that's where you start to really become powerful, and you're no longer subject to, everyone's opinion of you. You give that deep sense of okayness to yourself. And I mean, that is just the most empowering thing anyone can do. Yeah. At all.
I think it's important too to know. I continually have to remind myself about this, that if you care about what they think, if you feel that you need them to understand you, that's not wrong. It's not wrong to feel that way. All we're saying is that feeling is what it is part of being in a certain state of consciousness, right? And the trick is not to stuff the feeling or resist the feeling or deny the feeling or try to bypass the feeling or just everything's fine. It's not about that. I very frequently, I'm continually, because it's 70 times 7, you know what I'm saying? It's just turning the other cheek, look the other way kind of thing. I'm continually finding myself in a state that's causing me to see other people in a critical way, or causing me to be offended that other people don't like me, or that they didn't, express gratitude for something. This shit happens in my mind all the time. And when I notice it, I go, what state am I in? That's interesting. And rather than resisting the consequences of that state, I use the consequences of the state as a reminder to shift states. I said, my question that I ask, and this isn't a particularly pious question, but it works for me. I say, what would it take for me to not give a fuck about this? That for me is a powerfully
very pious. Debbie goes better than church.
It's a powerfully well. I mean, if you go to the church that I went to growing up, that's not exactly a high commendation, but I appreciate it. If when I ask myself, what would it take for me to not give an F about this? What I'm asking myself in a very visceral way is, who would I have to be conscious of being? What would I have to be conscious of being? What state of consciousness would I need to be dwelling in right now in order for this fact to not be part of my reality or to not be experientially significant in the way that it is right now? You know what I'm saying? Because one of the interesting things about every state of consciousness is that the consequences of that state teach you a lot about the shortcomings and about how to get out of it. Mm-hmm. I'm in a certain state of consciousness that's giving rise, is causing me to enter into relationships and to participate in relationships in such a way that I'm often misunderstood or feeling that I'm misunderstood and suffering over my perception of that misunderstanding. All of those things are consequences of the state that I'm in. All of those things are directing me towards, because if something's happening in your life and you don't want it to have it happen, your stuff's getting repossessed, or your stuff's getting repossessed, or you're getting tickets, you're getting towed because you haven't had to pay parking tickets, and you're feeling like a piece of crap because of that. You're feeling worried, you're feeling unworthy, you're feeling like the noose is tightening, you're feeling all those different things. That's all state of consciousness stuff. I say to myself, who and what would I have to be conscious of being in order to not have my car towed? Or who and what would I have to be conscious of being in order to not devalue myself because I'm temporarily financially embarrassed? There are all of these doorways out of these states. What would it take for you to not give an F about this? You know what I'm saying? What would have to be true? Since we graduated from chiropractic school, we've lived here and there and all over the place, and some of the time we've stayed with family members because for us in that moment it was easy to do, it was inexpensive, we were trying to get our business started and all this stuff. And at various points I felt like sometimes I'd feel kind of insecure about it. I'm like, geez, am I a failure? And I think this is this thing, a lot of people have this problem. Am I a failure in my own eyes at various points? And for some people, it's not financial. It's not about living with your parents or your grandparents or whatever. It's about like your family dynamics not the way you want it to be, or your business isn't taking off the way you want it to, or your romantic relationship is strained or unfulfilling or something like that. And you say to yourself, oh, Jesus, does this mean that, am I just a fuck up? Am I a failure? Am I a fraud? Am I just messing? And when you sit in this and you say, okay, this is a state of consciousness thing. The facts that are bothering me are a byproduct of my state of consciousness. The fact that I'm bothered by those facts, byproduct of my state of consciousness. Who and what do I need to be conscious of being in order to change these facts and be not bothered by them? This person doesn't understand my side of the story. That conflict is me pushed out. My suffering over that conflict is me pushed out. Ideas that I have about myself. What needs to be different in order for the situation to be different, in order for me to feel different about the situation? all these different levels, and sometimes I'll go for changing the situation. Sometimes I'll go for changing how I feel about it. Usually the best way for me to change the situation is to change how I feel about it. Who and what do I have to be conscious of being in order for there to be a genuine, felt, real, no bullshit, not a Prozac happy smile, like, fake positivity, a genuine transcendence of my current experience of this situation in my life. What would have to happen in my mind? What would have to happen in my consciousness, like in the background, felt sense of who and what I am? What would need to be different in order for my experience of this to be different? So we're saying it's okay if other people misunderstand you. But inside, though, you have a feeling perhaps that says, no, it's really not okay. No, it really isn't. And so what I'm saying to you is, it's not about taking our word for it or ignoring that feeling and heeding our teaching. It's about seeing yourself and saying, okay, that's an interesting idea. It's okay they disagree with me. It's okay they don't understand me. That's interesting. It's not accessible to me. I don't feel it. It sounds good, but it doesn't feel good because I'm not feeling it, because I feel the opposite. I feel that it does matter. What about me would have to be different in order for me to have a different experience of this current situation? And you start kind of exploring that and experimenting with it and tinkering with it. That's that intrapersonal work that I'm talking about. There's this interesting thing in the Bible where Jesus is like, who was it? It's Peter, somebody was trying to fish, and they were having a hell of a time fishing. They were like, they couldn't get any fish. They kept throwing the net in, and there was nothing there. You know what I'm saying? And it was just kind of depressing. And for me, interpersonal, which is to say, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, or, you need to respect me, I'll respect you, let's agree to all these platitudes and things. Imagine casting a fishing net out over the entire ocean, right? So the breadth of it was tremendous, but the depth of it was 1 centimeter. So you got this fishing net that covers the entire ocean, like the surface of it, but it only goes 1 centimeter deep. I suspect you could throw that thing out there and catch no fish. I mean, literally, it could cover the entire ocean. That to me is interpersonal stuff. That's me reaching an agreement with you, and we shake hands and say, okay, I'm going to drop the kids off at 3:30, and you'll be there at 3:30 to pick them up, and you won't say nasty things about me, and I won't criticize your new partner and all this different stuff. Good luck. You can tell I was like a child of divorce. Right? It never happens. But if you have one net, I don't know how big a fishing net normally is, but just an average size net, and it's deep enough to go down deep, right? You could pull up a huge haul. You could pull up a tremendous amount of fish, right? I think that when you're looking for the things that you want in life, you could try everything interpersonally. Well, we made this agreement, we made that agreement. I tried explaining them to them this way. They seemed to understand it, but then the next day they were back, and then I heard they were talking to so-and-so about me in the exact same old way. Now I'm angry, now I'm confused. If you cast the net intrapersonally, which is to say, why am I bothered by this? How is this me pushed out? What could I do to it? What would it take for me to not give a fuck about this? How could I experience this differently? What do I have to do in order to be so bothered by them being the way that they are? What do I have to do to create this feeling inside myself that I need them to be other than they are in order for me to feel okay? Really, it's that non-critical. It's a true, and it's an honest, and it's a kind of, it's not brutal, but it's a very, like the IRS auditor comes in, he doesn't spare your feelings, she doesn't care about what, it's just the facts, ma'am. When I'm observing myself, I just want the facts. Ooh, I assign a meaning to it that doesn't serve me. Then I don't beat myself up about it, though. I just notice it. And so I'm going to be totally honest with myself about what I'm doing in order to create a negative experience of them being the way that they are. But I'm then not going to create a negative experience of watching what I do to create a negative experience by beating myself up because of the fact that I do those things that create that experience. I'm just going to observe it and think about what I could be doing differently and discover it's a wonderful thing to discover the extent to which you are responsible for some unpleasant aspect of what it's like to be you. Like if you're really just watching it, and it's a wonderful thing. If I'm miffed at Melissa, I'm feeling oppressed, or I'm feeling somehow or another encumbered by you or a behavior that you engage in or something like that, and I'm convinced that it's your fault and it's your problem, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, let me just observe myself here. What do I have to do to create this experience? Because I'm 100% responsible for my experience of you, regardless of what's true about you. And then I see, well, I assigned this meaning, I ignore these wonderful things that she does, I just am in a crappy state to begin with. You know what I'm saying? I know that there's like 1,000 other states I could be in where what you're doing would either be neutral or even funny or nice or whatever. And so I'm like, oh, I'm responsible for this unpleasant experience of you. What a relief. What a relief, because that sense of being justified in suffering over you goes away. And then it's just, oh, I was unskillfully interacting with my reality. That's what that was. That wasn't having a bad girlfriend. That wasn't having someone who was, or someone out in public. It wasn't them being rude that I was suffering over. It was my inability to respond resourcefully to my reality at that moment in time because of my state of consciousness. Then you shift it. Then you're free. Then there's this exhilaration. Then it's wonderful. Then you realize you don't need them to understand you. And then the weird thing is they start understanding you.
So the homework if you want to start applying these ideas, get yourself an index card or a sticky note or something and write on it, what would it take for me to not give an F about this, to care less about this? Who would I have to be?
To not suffer over this.
To not suffer over this. And when you prompt yourself, when you are feeling bad anytime over the next week and you pull out this card, actually think about it. Who would I have to be? What would have to be true? What would I have to believe about myself? And
that's a big one.
Yeah. Like,
who would I have to feel myself to be? That's a huge one too.
Yeah, I mean, this will seriously help you in your life if you do this. Write it down, use it when you're feeling a way you don't want to feel. Like, figure out, who would I have to be? Like, what would have to be true for me to not care about this in the way that I'm caring about it? And that, it's like a secret door out of every nasty, negative, bad experience you could be having.
You could even say to not care unproductively about it. Because for some people, you say, oh, I don't care about it. It's like, well, but I do care about this relationship. What I'm talking about is there's the type and amount of caring that's resourceful because it leads to improving your experience and improving situations. Then there's the type and the amount of caring that does not help. You know, there's this, I have this, what was it, that idea that we had about what we want to care just enough to do what works, but not care so much we're willing to do what doesn't. Like there's this idea that, like, you know, you want to have a certain amount of it, you know. And I think that's that thing, is like, who and what would I have to feel myself to be in order for me to not devalue myself because of this, in order for me to not feel that I need this thing that I don't have. And I think the thing is it starts opening up these doors to all these different versions of you that you could be. And the more you explore those, the more you realize that the you that you happen to be right now is not more real than the you that you could be that would be more fulfilling and enriching and enjoyable for you. It's not about like being more productive so that you fit in the world or make other people happy. It's about this infinite capacity that we all have to give like expression to these different states of consciousness. And you start discovering that the fact that, you know, you could have a house that's got 30 rooms in it and be in one room for 80 years. And those other rooms would not be made less real by the fact that you hadn't explored them. And you could just as easily go from the living room to the bedroom, to the kitchen, to the drawing room, wherever you wanted to go, the entertainment room, the movie room. And literally, as soon as you go to that room, it's your reality. These states work this way. As soon as you go into that new state that says, maybe I'm so fundamentally okay that I can even be okay and realize how okay I am when other people think I'm not okay. Maybe that's a capacity I have that I haven't realized before. As soon as you kind of step into that, it's every bit as real as everything you ever had up until that point. And then you start saying, oh God, all these years I spent not being this person who feels the way that the person that I'm being now feels. I wonder who I'm not being who would feel really wonderful if I were being him or her now. I wonder where that is. And you start exploring this mansion that you have and discovering all these wonderful things that you can be. And it's a lot of fun. And you forget to worry about how they don't understand you. Because you realize, oh my God, I didn't understand me all this time. And I'm only now starting to get to realize all the things I'm capable of being. I can hardly fault them for not knowing. If I didn't know myself, they don't understand why I did what I did. I didn't understand that I was responsible for my experience of their non-understanding. And so my suffering was due to my own non-understanding. Their suffering was due to their non-understanding. What do I want to do? I want to develop the depth and breadth of my understanding. So I have more freedom, I have more power to help myself, to help other people by helping myself. All sorts of really cool things. Yeah,
if you want to explore more of that, we have courses, we do coaching. Send us a message, let us know. We love helping you guys. I mean, these tools have just transformed everything about our experience. And so that we know that they work and they're really fun. So yeah, we hope you found this helpful. Write that down on a note card. Actually do it. I think that'll be very helpful for some of you. And have a wonderful rest of your Sunday.
See you.
Bye. Good. Press all the buttons.
Press them all.